Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. On the very day I set out for the capital to get married, news arrived that my fiancé's family had met with a great catastrophe. The House of Qui, entangled in an embezzlement case, had been demoted, and the entire family was sentenced to exile. Fearing they would drag me down with them, they hurriedly wrote a letter breaking off the engagement, advising me to find a better man to rely on. Worried that I wouldn't have enough travel expenses to return home, the whole family scraped together every last penny, yet in the end, they could only gather a meager 3 taels of silver to give to me. I stood inside the dilapidated thatched cottage, looking at the 4 walls stained by wind and rain, and then looked at the young man standing before me. Even though he had fallen into destitution, Theodore Qui still maintained his upright appearance. His gentlemanly demeanor had not faded in the slightest. I spoke softly. "Why don't I just marry you anyway? I know how to farm, and I can endure hardship. Even if we are poor, we won't starve to death." Theodore's expression shifted slightly, his eyes filled with guilt. "If you follow me, I fear that for the rest of your life, you will never see a peaceful day." His words were not an exaggeration. On my way to the capital, I had heard plenty of rumors. The Qui family was detested by the emperor. The confiscation of their property wasn't truly because of embezzlement, but because they were swept up in the struggle for the throne. That they were only exiled now was thanks to many high-ranking officials exerting all their strength to plead for mercy. Who knows, perhaps one day, the emperor's rage might descend again, and the entire House of Qui might not even be able to keep their lives. He looked at me, his voice sincere yet heavy. "When you return, if anyone asks, just say it was my fault. That way, your reputation will not be damaged. Take these 3 taels of silver as a small travel allowance. I hope you don't mind that it is so little." A gray mist seemed to dim the daylight inside the dilapidated cottage. I sat on the only old wooden stool in the room, looking at the ashamed expression on Theodore's face. In truth, I didn't hear clearly what else he said. My mind was occupied with only one thought. The things I heard along the road were indeed correct. Theodore, the eldest son of the Qui family, was truly a man of rare handsomeness, and even more so, a true gentleman of integrity. When my mother was alive, she used to instruct me that when choosing a husband, one does not need wealth, but only upright character. A man like that, even if life becomes difficult later, will never mistreat his wife. The House of Qui may be ruined now, but Theodore still retains his noble spirit. He was afraid of implicating me, so he was determined to break off the engagement. He feared I would bear a bad reputation, so he told me to blame it all on him. He feared I would suffer from lack on my long journey home, so he gathered the very last of the family's silver to give to me. Just a moment ago, standing behind the curtain, I clearly saw that even Madame Evelyn Qui had removed the only silver hairpin from her head. I looked up at him, the corners of my lips curving slightly into a gentle smile. "Theodore, you are so determined not to marry me. Is it because you already have someone else in your heart?" "No, I do not." "Then, is it because you despise my background as a farm girl, that I am illiterate and unworthy of the Qui family?" "How could that be?" Theodore shook his head hurriedly, frantically explaining. "Lady Hazel, you are a very good person. It is just that I, Theodore, no longer have the standing to be a match for you." The smile in my eyes deepened. "Since that is the case, it means you also have feelings for me, correct?" Seeing that I was determined not to cancel the engagement, the members of the Qui family who were standing outside walked in one by one. Madame Evelyn held my hand tightly, tears falling like rain, endlessly praising me as a sensible child. "For Theodore to have a fiancé like you is his blessing. In the future, if he dares to treat you poorly, I will personally break his legs for you. I will absolutely not let him bully you." Although I stayed with the Qui family, Theodore and I still had not performed the wedding ceremony. Partly because the House of Qui was currently standing in the eye of the storm, and partly because they were still worried I would be swept into their disaster. At night, under the window frame, Theodore called out to me softly. "You have been in the capital for several days. Do you want to write a letter home to report that you are safe? If you have any message, just tell me. Tomorrow morning, I will stop by the post station to send the letter for you." Hearing him mention a family letter, my heart suddenly softened, remembering the farewell before I left Qingzhou. Back then, my uncle held my hand and instructed, "You are going to the capital to get married. If you are bullied by anyone, return immediately. Our family may not be wealthy, but we can still feed you. My aunt stood beside him, sighing. It is also because your father had a short life. Back then, he and the master of the Q family were fellow students, passing the examination in the same year. So this marriage alliance was formed. Who would have thought that just because of a bout of wind chill, he would depart this world so early? Saying this, her voice choked up. Otherwise, our Hazel would be a young lady of an official's family now, not making us worry like this. I hurriedly comforted her. If the Q family dares to look down on me because of my background or because I don't know how to read, I will throw the engagement letters straight in their faces. High status and matching households. I don't need any of that. At that time, it won't be them abandoning me, but me not deigning to marry them. I'll just get on a boat and come back home. Hearing this, my aunt tearfully let go of my hand and saw me off to the boat. On the way from Qingzhou to the capital, I also listened to quite a few stories about the Q family. People said the family rules were extremely strict. Men were not allowed to take concubines unless they had no children by the age of 40. The current head of the household also had only one wife, so the descendants were not numerous. The person betrothed to me since childhood was Theodore, the eldest son. Rumor had it that he was talented in both literature and martial arts, knew how to compose poetry, and was skilled in riding and archery, only that his temperament was somewhat cold and rigid. But rumors, after all, are just rumors. How could there be a cold gentleman who stands under a young maiden's window talking at night and even worries about writing a letter for her? I chuckled softly in my heart. Theodore, seeing I didn't respond, thought I hadn't heard clearly, so he tapped lightly on the window frame. Lady Hazel, if you haven't thought of what to write, can I come again tomorrow night? Just as he turned to leave, I called him back. Just write a few words for me. Write that everything is very good. The Q family treats me very well. Eldest brother Theodore is also very good. Everyone here is a good person. Before he could reply, Madame Evelyn stepped out from her room. Theodore, why are you bowing close to the window? The autumn wind is cold, be careful not to catch a chill. I looked down into the courtyard. The figure beneath the window had long since disappeared. I smiled and replied, I was watching a silly wild goose, mother. What wild goose? Why didn't I see it? As soon as you came out, mother, it flew away. Madame Evelyn laughed and said, there are no silly wild geese flying into the courtyard in autumn. I didn't even have time to explain before the sound of rushed footsteps echoed from outside. A squad of imperial guards barged straight into the courtyard, coldly proclaiming the decree. The emperor orders the Q family to be immediately escorted into exile. The disaster struck too suddenly, without any warning signs. The male relatives and female relatives were separated, taken along two different paths. Before being taken away, Theodore hurriedly grabbed my hand, lowering his voice to instruct me. In the capital right now, there are too many people who want to take the lives of the Qui family. It will actually be safer for you to travel with the female relatives. They rarely make things difficult for women, the elderly, and children. If you arrive in Qingzhou and after 2 months still do not see me return, do not wait for me anymore. He squeezed my hand lightly, secretly stuffing an object into my palm. In the courtyard, the torchlight flickered unsteadily. The cold blades at the waists of the imperial guards reflected a gloomy light. Each man of the Q family was shackled with heavy chains and forced onto the road right in the cold autumn night. Only then did I fully understand the meaning behind the words Theodore had spoken during the day. He was a person who might be alive today, but uncertain to keep his life tomorrow. If I followed him, I fear I could also die at any moment. He wanted to push me out of that dangerous whirlpool, which is why he was determined to cancel the engagement. But my mother once taught me, if someone gives you a peach, you must return it with jade. Theodore never looked down on me because of my poor background, so I could not leave him just because he had fallen into misfortune. As Theodore's figure gradually faded into the night, my heart tightened. I hurriedly took a few quick steps, shouting after him, eldest brother, take care of your health. I will wait for you in Qingzhou. Half of his body had already sunk into the darkness, only his eyes remained, gleaming with a deep smile. The autumn night was silent, the cold wind cutting into flesh, yet my palms were soaked with sweat. I looked down and opened the object that had just been stuffed into my hand. Meeting my eyes was a thin sheet of paper that had been written in advance. A divorce letter. It turned out that Theodore had prepared a way out for me from early on. As long as I couldn't bear the hardships on the exile road to Qingzhou, I could take this paper and return to Qingzhou, escaping the identity of the Q family's daughter-in-law. I let out a cold snort. This Theodore truly underestimates me too much. If you do not betray me, I will absolutely never leave you. The next time we meet, I must make you understand. I am not a weak woman who only knows how to turn her back and run away. After the male relatives of the Q family were escorted away, everything happened exactly as Theodore had said. The squad of Imperial Guards was not too harsh on us, it was just that the road to exile was arduous far beyond imagination. Even I, someone used to farm work and enduring hardship since childhood, was exhausted to the point of collapse, let alone the women of the Q family, who were used to living in comfort. We had only been traveling for 5 days when the youngest sister of the Q family, little Fei, developed a high fever in the middle of the night. Madame Evelyn held her daughter tight in her arms, tears flowing endlessly. What are we to do now? We are suffering like this, let alone the master and the sons, who knows how miserable they must be. The faces of the Imperial Guards that night remained coldly unreadable. We didn't know how the Imperial Court ultimately intended to deal with the House of Qui. Madame Evelyn was an only daughter, pampered from childhood, married to Master Qui, her father's favorite student. Her married life had been harmonious and warm, she had never suffered hardship. The sudden disaster left her almost disoriented. The remaining female relatives were either old and weak or too young. No one had the strength to shoulder major responsibilities. I looked at Fei in Madame Evelyn's arms, her face flushed red, her body burning hot. Then I looked at the people crying in chaos everywhere. Finally, I walked straight towards the guards keeping watch. First, I said that my little sister was seriously ill and needed a doctor. But they shook their heads continuously, firmly refusing. One of them sighed in a dilemma. Young lady, you must understand. You are now court prisoners. Many eyes are watching. We are just people doing a job for wages. We dare not overstep our authority. I immediately understood. So I took a step back and spoke softly. Then what if I go find herbal medicine myself? They did not answer, only silently turned their faces away. That was a tacit agreement. I thought, smiling lightly in gratitude as I placed the brocade bag containing the silver next to their fire. I understood the difficulty of these men clearly. They let me leave because they didn't want to be completely heartless to the Q family. After all, no one could be sure if the family would one day overturn the case, but at the same time, they feared punishment from their superiors. Therefore, I took the initiative to shoulder all the consequences. If there were any inquiries, just say I left custody without permission, unrelated to them. Fortunately, the medicinal herbs I found helped Fei's fever subside. Madame Evelyn cried even more than before, holding my hand tightly and not letting go. Hazel, if not for you, I fear Fei would not have kept her life. Weakly, Fei also spoke words of thanks as her mother instructed, but I knew clearly this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the weather became colder and colder, and our circumstances became increasingly difficult. There were deep silent nights when I lay listening to the autumn wind whistling through the grass hut, unable to stop myself from missing Theodore. Their road of exile was likely tenfold more miserable, and who knew when they would be able to set foot in Qingzhou. Putting aside the matter of the female relatives for a moment, let me speak of that day. After Theodore was escorted away by the Imperial Guards, while on the road, he asked for paper and brush, wanting to write a letter to send to his close friend who was serving as the prefect of Qingzhou. If the female relatives of the Ku family were sent to Qingzhou, they would inevitably have to pass through Qingzhou. If there was an acquaintance to look after them, that segment of the journey would surely be less arduous. He pondered for a moment, then lowered his brush to write an additional line. My dear brother, I am young of age. If by misfortune something happens to me, please find a kind family on my behalf to marry Hazel Li into, so she may live in peace. When Conrad Gu received that letter, it was just as the female relatives of the Q family entered the territory of Qingzhou. His eyes lingered for a long time on the words, find a kind family, and the corners of his lips couldn't help but curve into a mocking smile. Theodore has truly read books until he's become muddled. In this world, where is there a woman as deeply sentimental and righteous as he describes in his words, let alone one who hasn't even officially married him yet? Even if they were already husband and wife, encountering a great disaster of exile like this, I fear she would have long since turned her back and left. How could she willingly follow her husband's family to suffer all the way to Qingzhou? Conrad chuckled softly. thinking to himself that if that woman wasn't stupid to the extreme, then she must be incredibly ugly, to the point that no one wants to marry her. Therefore, the day the Q family arrived, he personally went out to welcome them. But as soon as he looked up, his eyes met a pair of almond eyes, clear as spring water. In that gaze, there was a gentle smile, carrying the unique softness of a woman from Jiangnan. His heart suddenly trembled powerfully. It turned out Theodore's wife was not stupid at all. Not only that, she was beautiful to the point that it was hard to look away. Just a slight smile from her, and her eyes seemed to ripple like spring waves. When we arrived in Qingzhou, the squad of guards escorting us was also replaced by another group. The leading official, upon seeing Madame Evelyn, respectfully called her aunt. Madame Evelyn leaned close to my ear and whispered, "That is Theodore's confidant." During the few days we stayed in Qingzhou, thanks to Conrad's care, the treatment of the Q family was indeed much better. Madame Evelyn held my hand, introducing me to him. "This is eldest son's fiancée. If not for this girl taking care of everything along the road, I fear the old and young of our family could not have held on." Conrad froze for a moment, obviously not expecting that I had still followed the Q family all the way here. Then he sighed softly in admiration. "Sister-in-law is truly exactly as Brother Theodore described, a person who values love and righteousness." He bowed seriously to perform a formal greeting. "Previously, it was I who used a small man's heart to measure a gentleman's belly. Please forgive me, sister-in-law." Looking at his upright, somewhat rigid appearance, I only found it amusing. I didn't expect Theodore to have a friend this righteous. But thinking about it carefully, it wasn't strange. A person like Theodore would naturally attract gentlemen of the same path. This time, Conrad came not only to take care of the Q family, he also brought important news. The emperor has issued a decree pardoning the exile punishment for the Q family. You do not need to go to Qingzhou anymore. Hearing this, first I was overjoyed beyond measure. At least the Q family no longer had to suffer the fate of exile in a foreign land. But immediately after, doubt arose in my heart. If there is no more exile, then how will the original charges against the Qui family be handled? And when will Theodore and the male relatives be able to return? I cautiously voiced the thoughts in my mind. Conrad lowered his eyes and smiled. Brother Theodore and the others have naturally also been pardoned, it is just that all their official titles have been stripped. He sent a letter to me saying that everything is temporarily settled. Wait for you all to settle down in Qingzhou, and they will return soon. Perhaps due to Theodore's prior instructions, Conrad wholeheartedly arranged everything for us. He arranged a spacious three-courtyard house in the city, complete with maids and servants, lacking nothing. But in my heart there was still a bit of unease. Although Conrad was Theodore's close friend, if the Q family continued to rely on him to live, over time it would inevitably breed awkwardness. After discussing with Madame Evelyn, I decided to go buy farmland to secure our own livelihood. Conrad immediately went with me personally. Sure enough, the rumors were true. Carriage drivers, boat owners, innkeepers, 9 out of 10 are crooks. 2 pieces of barren land were blown up into fertile fields. 8/10 of a mu of hard soil was touted as a full acre. It was all the slippery tongue of those brokers. I let him talk incessantly, not bothering to argue. I just walked around the field once. It was stubborn soil that would require 2 cows and 2 horses to plow. One look and I knew immediately. It took a full 3 days of running back and forth before I reluctantly bought 2 acres of paddy fields from the broker. Conrad was somewhat puzzled. Clearly, there are 10 acres of top-grade fields in the outskirts. Why did you pass them over and choose only these 2 acres of medium-grade land? I carefully put the land deed into my sleeve and slowly explained. Too much good land will easily make people red-eyed with jealousy. Our family is outsiders coming here to start a business, not familiar with the neighbors around. If people secretly make things difficult, it will be very troublesome. But 2 acres of medium-grade land are different, just enough to live on, but not too conspicuous. That way is safer. Conrad frowned. With me here in Qingzhou, who dares to touch you people? I shook my head slightly. There are still things in this world beyond the reach of your excellency. Moreover, you have helped us too much already. Conrad was born into a noble family. He understood etiquette, classics, and imperial laws. However, he had never experienced the unspoken rules of the villages or the sufferings of commoners. I pointed at the land deed in his hand and asked softly, "Do you know that if you hadn't come with me today, I probably wouldn't have been able to buy even a single foot of land? Farmland around these villages is mostly not sold to outsiders. If there is surplus land, priority is given to the villagers first. Only if no one in the village buys it does it reach the turn of an outsider. Outsiders who want to buy must also rely on local residents to stand as guarantors, and the price is often hiked up several times over. That is also the reason why displaced people find it so hard to settle down. I had intentionally dragged Khan along to borrow a bit of his prestige. In all of Qingzhou, how many people would dare not give face to the prefect himself? Conrad straightened his robes and bowed seriously to me. The ancient said, when three people walk together. Today, my eyes have truly been opened. Thank you for your guidance, Lady Hazel. I curved my eyes and smiled softly. Lord Conrad, saying that makes me feel quite shy. An illiterate farm girl like me is acting as a teacher to a scholar today. Seeing me smile, he laughed along as well. With the land deeds in hand, I began to plan the sowing for the coming year. Conrad, as the prefect of Qingzhou, was responsible for promoting agriculture, so he frequently came to ask me about farming matters. I always felt a bit awkward. In Qingzhou, there were plenty of experienced old farmers who were all more skilled than I was. But one sentence from him made it impossible for me to refuse. They may be skilled, but none of them dare to point out my mistakes. One afternoon, I was discussing the hiring of tenant farmers for the next year with Madame Evelyn. Suddenly, the door was pushed open forcefully. A figure stood against the light at the entrance, making it impossible for me to see his face clearly for a moment. Theodore, is that you, my son? Madame Evelyn's voice trembled with excitement. My heart seemed to stop beating for an instant. Theodore rushed inside. It was clear that as soon as he reached Qingzhou, he had immediately run straight home. Following behind him were the other male relatives of the Qui family. I looked at him, so many words wanting to pour out of my throat, but in the end, only one sentence escaped. Are you still doing well? His eyes curved with a smile. Everything is good. Thank you, Hazel, for taking care of my family during this time. Their return caused the House of Qui to suddenly become bustling and lively. The next day, when Conrad came to visit, I was reviewing the land account books with Theodore. Brother Theodore, when did you return? Conrad was both joyful and surprised. Why didn't you send a word to me so I could send men to welcome you? Theodore smiled. There were originally 4 or 5 days left of the journey, but I heard that the family had bought land, and I was worried, so I rode day and night to return early. In that case, we must have a satisfying drink tonight. Conrad turned to smile at me. I'll trouble sister-in-law to prepare a few side dishes. This was the first time he had called me sister-in-law. Previously, he had always called me by my name. I was momentarily stunned. That evening, the two of them drank wine in the courtyard. I sat beside them, listening to Theodore recount the inner details of the pardon. He spoke slowly. Initially, the autumn tax inspection was handled by the men of the Prince of Yan. Those people wanted to curry favor with him, so they secretly skimmed off part of the taxes meant for the treasury. My father discovered the discrepancies in the records and immediately reported it to the court. But those people didn't dare investigate the Prince of Yan, so they pushed all the blame onto my father's head. Conrad rolled his eyes, immediately understanding. He gave a cold laugh. The emperor is aging now, and has become soft-hearted toward his children. He couldn't bear to punish the Prince of Yan, so he had to vent his anger on a loyal official. That is also why as soon as someone stood up to plead for the Qui family, they were immediately pardoned. I didn't fully understand all the schemes of the court, but I felt a surge of resentment in my heart. That emperor is truly too much. Master Theodore worked hard at his studies for so many years, yet because of one sentence, his entire future is gone. The entire Qui family almost died in exile. Theodore only gave a faint smile and did not reply. Conrad was already a bit tipsy. He tapped lightly on his wine cup, laughing without much restraint. All under heaven is the king's land. All who live upon the land are the king's subjects. If the king wants the subject to die, how does the subject dare not die? These matters, you are just a young woman, how could you understand? I had never studied the books of the sages, but hearing those words, they felt extremely jarring. I looked straight at him, my voice soft but firm. Lord Conrad understands the logic of scholars, while I am just a simple woman from the countryside. I do not understand the great righteousness of the world. I only know how to feel heartache for my own husband. Being rebuffed by me until he was speechless, Conrad had no more words to defend himself. He only gave a slight laugh. Lady Hazel truly has a sharp tongue. Conversely, you make me look like a petty man. I gave a light huff, not bothering to reply. Theodore, meanwhile, moved his gaze back and forth between the two of us, finally lowering his head, seemingly deep in thought about something. The jade moon had risen high, and silvery light filled the courtyard. Unknowingly, the night had reached the late hours. Theodore had drunk than usual, his body leaned slightly, resting entirely against me. The faint scent of wine swirled around us, carrying a familiar warmth. His lips moved slightly, his voice softening in his drunken state. Hazel. Look, there is a moon in my wine cup. The moon has fallen into my hand. I looked down. The moonlight in the cup rippled gently with his breath. When I looked up, he was watching me intently, his eyes as clear as autumn water reflecting the swaying moonlight. He leaned in and placed a light kiss on the corner of my eye, tasting faintly of sweet wine. You belong to me, too, he whispered softly, and in the future don't meet with Conrad anymore. The night wind rustled the curtains, and my heart fluttered along with it. Theodore's drunken words were fragmented, not connecting from start to finish. The next day, when I mentioned it again, he looked at me with an innocent face, saying he remembered absolutely nothing. I could only suffer the loss helplessly. Just as all the men of the Qui family had returned, it also happened to be the end of the year. From then on, Theodore followed me out every day to shop for the new year. It was through these days of being close that I discovered beneath his upright demeanor, he hid a rare bit of playfulness. I told him he should go out and chat with friends or stay by his mother's side more. He, however, looked at me seriously and said words that were not proper at all. My Hazel, is this beautiful? If your husband doesn't keep watch, what if you are snatched away by someone else? I scolded him for being muddled, and he immediately put on a look of harmless innocence. Perhaps because the new year was approaching. Conrad had not stopped by for a long time. It wasn't until New Year's Eve that I suddenly remembered him. I asked Theodore. Lord Conrad is from the Xianxia region. He has no relatives in Qingzhou and few friends. Should we invite him to spend New Year's Eve with us? Previously, Conrad told me that for several years in a row, he had been on duty alone at the government office on the last night of the year, very lonely. Hearing this, Theodore immediately showed a look of jealousy. Why do you care about him so much? He's not a child anymore. He's eaten New Year's dinner alone for years, it's not like he'll starve to death. I couldn't help but laugh. Looking at him now, he was no different from a pouting child. Since Theodore was unhappy, I didn't mention inviting Conrad again. But I quietly sent someone to bring a box of dumplings to the government office. Only then did Theodore feel at ease. Not long after the new year had passed, before the first month was even over, Theodore received a secret letter sent from the capital in the middle of the night. Someone wanted him to engage in maritime trade. As soon as I heard it, I shook my head. This task was too dangerous. Born in Qingzhou, I understood the perils of merchant ships on the open sea. Out of 10 voyages to sea, one is lucky to survive even once. It is a path only the desperately poor would risk their lives to tread. But where there is great danger, there is also great profit. Theodore looked at me once, and I understood. I could not stop him. This was an opportunity sent by those people. He was not permitted to refuse, nor was there a path of retreat. When Mother heard the news, she cried for an entire afternoon. On the day he set out, I personally packed his bags. The sea has strong winds and high waves, you must be careful. If you get seasick, remember to take the medicine I prepared. I also roasted a bag of yellow soil. If you aren't suited to the local water and land, dissolve it in water and drink it. I gave him countless instructions, yet I still felt it wasn't enough. He pulled me into his arms and handed me a box of banknotes, all the money he had saved during this time. If I do not return, you are not allowed to remarry. He paused, then whispered. If you truly want to remarry, you must find someone 1,000 times, 10,000 times better than me. I nodded. In the pitch black night, Theodore spurred his horse and left, his figure quickly swallowed by the deep darkness. The lamps in the manor were lit one by one, leaving only the sound of faint sobbing echoing in the wind. Time passed quietly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the second day of the second lunar month. People often say, on the second day of the second month, the dragon raises its head. A good time to go out for a spring outing. I led the whole family to the fields for a walk. Fei Kai, now 10 years old and at an age where she loved to play, kept clinging to me, asking me to dig for wild vegetables. Sister-in-law, you're so amazing, you know so many kinds of wild vegetables. Her eyes sparkled as she looked at me. Am I really that amazing? I laughed. I originally thought these were things everyone in the countryside knew, living off the mountains when near mountains, living off the fields when near fields. In my heart, scholars like Theodore were the truly impressive ones. They knew how to read and understood etiquette. Even the county magistrate had to respect them a bit. Of course you are, Faye answered seriously. Big brother is amazing because he reads books. But my sister-in-law is also amazing. He understands the logic in books, but you understand the logic of the fields. How can you say you aren't impressive? She paused for a moment and then continued. Besides, if not for sister-in-law, I would have died on the road to exile back then. Her sincere voice made my heart skip a beat. Faye pulled my hand back toward the donkey cart, and a realization vaguely dawned on me. It turned out that I, too, was a person of value. I looked at the piece of land before me. In my mind, I began to calculate what should be planted next season. The climate of Qingzhou was not very favorable. Each year only one crop of rice could be cultivated. After the rice harvest, I also planned to squeeze in a crop of winter wheat. This was something I had calculated in advance. Along the banks of the fields, we could also intercrop soybeans. When the harvest came, we could just happen to make tofu, enough for the whole family, and even some left over to sell for a small profit. I carefully weighed each item. The spring wind blew through the patches of young grass, the warmth grew clearer day by day. In a blink, it was time for seedling nursing. That day, I was soaking seeds with Faye when a servant rushed in, urging me to get to the fields immediately. He said the House of Qui had gotten into an argument with the Ye villagers over the matter of leading water for irrigation. Hearing this, my heart sank. If rice fields were to be good, water was indispensable. If someone intentionally blocked the irrigation canals and wouldn't let water flow into the fields, the entire season's crop would be as good as lost. When I arrived, I happened to catch Master Thomas Q in a heated argument with the Ye villagers. The water in this canal was dug and led here by us Ye villagers. You outsiders are not allowed to use it. A group of people, hoes and shovels in hand, were brazenly blocking the water flow, refusing to open the ditch. Master Thomas tried to reason with them using logic, but they were all simple country folk. How could they understand those scholarly words? If you want to use it, you have to pay silver. Their intention was immediately exposed. Paying a bit of money wouldn't be an issue, but if we yielded once, they would surely demand more without end in the future. Growing up in the countryside, I was all too familiar with these tricks. Today they collect money for water. Tomorrow they'll find an excuse about stepping on a field ridge and demand more silver. Demanding money for water reaching the fields. I'm truly hearing this for the first time. I pushed through the crowd and stepped in front of Master Thomas. You see that our family are outsiders with no clan here to back us up, so you're taking the chance to squeeze us for silver, right? The crowd pretended not to hear, still stubbornly demanding money. What is a woman meddling for? Does your house have no men that you're letting a woman show her face like this? If you don't know how to teach her, we'll teach her for you. They spat on the ground, their demeanor no different from a bunch of thugs. Master Thomas, panicked, pulled on my sleeve, fearing I would suffer a loss. I only gave a cold smile. I was never someone easily intimidated. I snatched a hoe from a servant's hand and slammed it hard onto the ground. All of you, shut your mouths. Today, even if the village chief comes, you are the ones in the wrong. If you don't restore the water ditch to its original state, just go ahead and follow me to the government office to eat the magistrate's rod. Right at that moment, Faye had arrived with a squad of government runners. The village chief also followed in a hurry. The Ye villagers looked at each other. Those who had been shouting aggressively a moment ago all shrunk back. Finally, the noisy conflict ended peacefully. However, in my heart, I understood clearly. Today I had relied on the prestige of the government office to force them to retreat. If the root cause wasn't solved, these kinds of troubles would only increase in the future. That afternoon, I sought out Master Thomas and Madame Evelyn. Father, have you ever thought about opening a private school to teach the village children their first lessons? As soon as he heard this, Master Thomas immediately understood my intention. His eyes lit up. Hazel, this is a brilliant idea. People of the world gather for profit and scatter for profit. In this era, anyone who can read is respected. If you can read, you no longer need to spend your whole year digging in the dirt to live. If Master Thomas opened a private school to teach for free, surely the people of the area would flock to it. With benefits binding them, they would naturally stand on our family's side. By the time the Ye villagers wanted to cause trouble, the other villagers wouldn't allow it. I had inquired. Qingzhou was already remote, let alone a small village like Yi Village. People who could rear as rare as gold dust in these parts. Private schools were even scarcer. The House of Qui currently had nothing but people who had once read books. In the past, Master Thomas and the brothers had all lectured at the Hanlin Academy. Their teaching children was a great blessing. After careful discussion, I started the preparations the very next day. Not long after, Conrad returned to Qingzhou from the capital. Seeing the Ye villagers personally coming to the door to apologize, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Lady Hazel, you are truly formidable. Don't speak of one scholar. Even if 10 of us were added together, we wouldn't be your match." I raised an eyebrow and laughed lightly. Course I'm smart. Otherwise, how could a 5-year-old child who lost both parents like me have survived until today? After everything in the house had gradually settled, Faye pulled my hand, insisting on teaching me how to read. This was truly like trying to take my life. Those characters were as if they knew me from a past life, while I couldn't remember a single one for the life of me. I sat by the window, a few peach branches from outside reached in, their pink blossoms layered in light and dark shades. Right at that moment, Faye slowly read, dark blossoms, pale blossoms, in shades of deep and light, they bloom together. Beautiful flowers can hardly compare to the person. I was momentarily dazed, wondering where Theodore had reached by now. Was he thinking of me? Qingzhou had clear skies and warm sunshine, but out on the open sea, storms were surging. Theodore had been at sea for more than 3 months, still drifting on the waves. It had been half a month since the last time the 5th prince had asked a sea merchant to send a letter back. The sky and sea were a single shade of grayish blue. Massive waves rolled as if they wanted to swallow the tiny ship whole. Weather at sea was inherently fickle, clear yesterday howling with gale, force winds today. Amidst the roaring waves, Theodore suddenly remembered me. Those who trade on the sea all year round say that feelings must be expressed in words, for no one knows which voyage will be their last. Theodore suddenly felt a pang of regret. He should have made his heart clearer to Hazel sooner. If, by some misfortune, he were to be buried in the depths of the sea, she might never know the depth of his devotion. However, he did not regret following Prince Julian Zhao. The prince had promised that if he one day ascended the throne, he would wash away the grievances of the House of Qui. Fortunately, the heavens seemed to favor Theodore. Not only did he successfully open a maritime trade route, but he also brought back a complete naval chart of the sea territories. Prince Julian asked him what reward he desired. Theodore knelt and replied, "Your Highness, I only ask that you bestow upon me a phoenix crown and a ceremonial robe. My Hazel is so wonderful. She deserves to be married with a 10-mile red wedding procession, carried in a sedan by 8 men, as the most radiant bride in the world." Julian laughed heartily. Master Theodore is truly a sentimental soul. Then, let me test her for a moment. Let us see just how wonderful this Lady Hazel in your mouth really is. Theodore's face immediately turned serious. He was not afraid, he believed in Hazel. He simply did not like the idea of putting true feelings to a test. "Your Highness, this would wound the heart. I beg you not to do this." And he was also afraid. He was only a demoted official. He feared that one day Hazel would no longer want him. Back in Qingzhou, I counted every day waiting for Theodore to return. He had left in the first month, and now it was already the double 9th festival, yet there was still no news. Anxiety began to grow in my heart. The weather was turning cold. Did he have enough clothes? The sea was unpredictable. Was he eating well? I was so frustrated that I began doodling circles on a piece of paper when a shout came from behind. "Sister Hazel, you're being so lazy. I told you to practice your characters, and yet you're scribbling like this." Faye jumped out of nowhere. I hurriedly gave her a flattering smile. "My dear Faye, let me off the hook. Just looking at the account books is enough for me. I'm not going to take the imperial examinations. As long as I recognize the words, it's fine. I really have no affinity for books. As soon as I hear those flowery sentences, I get sleepy." For the past half-year, Faye had become addicted to teaching me. Whenever she was free, she would drag me into the study. Even the village children her father taught weren't as diligent as I was forced to be. Occasionally, when Conrad came to visit, I could catch a breath, but Faye would still sit nearby, watching over me, and after the time it took for an incense stick to burn, she would make me continue. I always felt that Conrad's eyes had something to say, but Faye never gave him a chance. In truth, I was glad she blocked him. Conrad liked to say things I couldn't understand at all, like, "Having seen the gentleman, how could I not be happy?" After reading it, he would stare at me and ask for my feelings. My head would ache as if hit by a hammer. What, gentlemen? I just wanted to see the accounting ledger. Finally, the day of the Double Ninth Festival arrived. I breathed a sigh of relief and sneaked into the kitchen to cook soybean meat soup with Madame Evelyn. The fire in the stove crackled red, and the fragrance filled the room. I was stirring the pot when a familiar, laughing voice echoed behind me. "The little lady's meat soup smells so good. I wonder if you could grant me a bowl. It's been half a year, and I haven't had a proper meal." I turned my head. At that moment, a pair of eyes curving with a smile struck my heart directly. It was Theodore. The sea wind had tanned him a bit, but his features were as bright and clear as ever. In his hand, he held an empty bowl, looking incredibly pitiful. "If the little lady doesn't take pity and give me a bowl of soup, I fear I'll die of longing." My heart softened instantly. But Theodore had not returned alone. Beside him stood a youth in silk robes, with a handsome face and an air of composed nobility. One look and you knew he was no ordinary person. I heard he was a friend Theodore met on the road. Only Master Thomas's face darkened slightly for a moment. I pretended not to notice and treated him like a regular guest. During the meal, Faye and the stranger chatted very agreeably. Through their conversation, I gathered he was highly educated and of high status. The surname Zhao was the most noble in the world, and the current emperor had 5 princes. The age of the 5th prince matched this, young Master Julian, perfectly. After the meal, I led the way to arrange Julian's rest. To my surprise, as soon as I turned to leave, he blocked my path. His eyes were curved with a hard-to-read smile. "I heard Theodore praise his fiancée as being one of kind under heaven," he said slowly. "Having met you today, I see your reputation is well-deserved. Lady Hazel, you are indeed extraordinary." I didn't want to linger, I only wanted to find Theodore. But he continued in a shallow tone. "A woman as good as you following Theodore is truly a waste. Why not follow me instead? My background and wealth far exceed his. Besides, the House of Qui is still branded as criminals of the court." The fire of rage immediately flared up in my chest. "Your words are filthy to the ear," I snapped. "Master Theodore treats you as a friend, yet you covet his fiancée. You are no better than a beast." There happened to be a bowl of cold tea on the table. Without a second thought, I splashed it straight into his face. Out there, even the illiterate understand that a friend's wife is not to be touched. "You call yourself a gentleman of the Zhao family. I see you are not even equal to a commoner." Julian stood frozen. I wasn't finished yet, I was about to grab something else to throw at him. He immediately dodged to the side, shouting, "Theodore, save me, I was wrong." Theodore rushed in at that exact moment. Looking at the scene, he could only smile bitterly. "I told you Hazel was wonderful. Why wouldn't you believe me? You insisted on testing her heart. Being splashed with cold tea is exactly what you deserve." I felt as if struck by a lightning bolt. Julian started laughing. "Now I know there truly is a woman in this world so loyal and fierce. I lose." At that moment I understood everything. This insulting behavior today was something Theodore had known about in advance. The anger in my heart boiled over. Before Theodore could explain, I raised my hand and delivered a loud slap across Theodore's face that echoed through the room. He froze. Tears began to stream down my face uncontrollably. "Theodore, you are too much. I waited for you for half a year, I was willing to suffer exile with you, and yet you brought someone to test my heart." My chest felt tight with pain. "I loved you with all my sincerity, and yet you did not trust me." Julian panicked as well and hurried forward. "It's all my fault. This was my idea." Theodore really didn't know at first. So, I raised my hand and slapped Julian as well. "Hemph, you think you're so great? You're not a good person either." After saying that, I burst into tears and ran straight out of the courtyard. Back in my room, I immediately began packing my things. My only thought was to return to Qingzhou. Faye, hearing the commotion, rushed in. After hearing the whole story, her eyes turned red with anger, and she immediately went to find her parents. Soon, the entire manor was in an uproar. Master Thomas and Madame Evelyn were so angry their faces turned pale. Madame Evelyn slammed the table. "That rebellious son, how dare he do such a thing?" She turned to me. "Hazel, don't be afraid. You will always be the daughter-in-law of our house. If Theodore isn't good enough, you can just pick someone else." Theodore didn't dare enter the house, he only knelt on the steps outside the door. Master Thomas and Madame Evelyn sat on one side, cold and silent. Faye stood in the middle, looking at me and then at her brother, so tense she didn't dare open her mouth. Theodore tremblingly took a phoenix hairpin from his robe and offered it to me. "Hazel, please, do not leave me. Even a prisoner on death row has a chance to defend himself. You cannot just walk away from me." He cried, and I cried too. A day that should have been a joyful reunion ended in a chaotic mess. Julian also knew he had caused a disaster and hurried to apologize. "My dear brother's wife, today was entirely my fault. I took it upon myself to test your heart. Theodore truly had no part in it." He bowed repeatedly with hands clasped. In the end, I didn't leave that night, but for the following days, I didn't say a single word to Theodore. Julian also took the initiative to avoid me. Only Conrad kept running to the manor every day. Theodore wrote letters to me every day asking Faye to deliver them. Conrad, standing nearby, was often targeted by Theodore's sarcasm. "As Lord Conrad's so free, has the Qingzhou government office run out of work?" I didn't give Conrad a good face either. After being treated coldly several times, he finally fell silent. My birthday fell at the end of the 11th month. The weather grew colder, and big news began to spread from the capital. It was said the emperor's health was failing. Prince Julian left Qingzhou around that time. Theodore was frequently absent, and even Conrad became noticeably busy. I looked at the letters Theodore sent every day, and I couldn't help but worry. What exactly was he doing? Vaguely, I could guess a few parts of it. To be honest, through those daily letters, I had forgiven him long ago. I was just being stubborn and avoiding him out of lingering hurt. Until the day of my birthday. Faye mysteriously led me to a mountain villa outside the city. It was nearly the 12th month, yet all over the mountainside, azaleas were in full bloom. The brilliant red color was like a fire burning amidst the cold winter frost. "Hazel, happy birthday." The familiar voice sounded behind me. Theodore, at some unknown moment, had appeared there, holding a large bouquet of deep red azaleas. I knew he had heard from Faye that I loved these flowers, so he had people carefully tend to them in the manor for months, just so they could be brought here today. My eyes suddenly burned, and the scenery before me blurred into a flickering red haze. "Hazel, that day was my fault. I was the one who hurt you. Can you forgive me this once?" In a secluded corner in the distance, Julian and Conrad were pretending to be busy ordering servants around, but their eyes were constantly stealing glances at us. At this moment I had no more resentment in my heart. I nodded softly. In that instant, the gloom that had accumulated in Theodore's eyes for months vanished completely. He was so happy that he pulled me into a tight embrace and spun me around in a great circle, laughing and cheering. "Hazel, you've forgiven me. Then, can we get married right now?" "Not yet." I intentionally put on a serious face, though my eyes sparkled with laughter. "You promised me, remember, a 10-mile red wedding, a sedan with 8 carriers, a phoenix crown, and a ceremonial robe. I haven't seen any of those yet." Theodore burst into a laugh. His expression exactly like a child who had just been rewarded. He scooped me up with one arm and placed me on his shoulder, his laughter echoing through the mountain villa with the wind. "Everything I promised you, I will never forget in this lifetime." In the 2nd month of the following year, the old emperor passed away. Prince Julian ascended the throne, taking the era named Qingyuan. Theodore was appointed as the prime minister. In the 3rd month, the prime minister submitted a petition asking the new emperor to grant a marriage decree, personally seeking a grand wedding for me. The phoenix crown and the red robe were exactly as promised. On the day he received the imperial decree, Theodore was dressed in his deep crimson official robes, with a jade belt embroidered with exquisite patterns. He held the decree tightly in his hands, his eyes bright with joy. He almost ran toward me. "Hazel, I have come to marry you." The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe.